The craziness of 2025 starts this week, and that's because we have a plethora of highlights, but the main event this week is Venus stationing retrograde in Aries. And you've been following my channel for a while. Over this past year, maybe even 2 years, I've talked a lot about spring of 2025 being a really big deal. And it all starts with the Venus retrograde. Now, I have a video about the Venus retrograde. It'll be out maybe before this, maybe after this video is posted. However, the way I wanted to talk about this Venus retrograde is that it's not just a Venus retrograde. It's initiating and bringing in the Mercury retrograde, Neptune going into Aries, Saturn going into Aries, eclipses. Everything that's about to happen starts with this Venus retrograde, which is what we get this week. This week, we also have a couple other highlights, which is one, Mercury conjoining Saturn. Number two, the new moon in Pisces. And I love when we have a new moon right before a bunch of major astrology transits. But we'll also have Mercury conjoin the North Node, as well as Mercury making a conjunction to Neptune and the Sun squaring Jupiter by the time that we end this week. So let's go ahead and get started talking about it. Welcome back to the Astrology Report, this time for February 24th through March 2nd of 2025. My name is Cam White, if you don't know me already. I'm a professional astrologer. All I like to do is talk about the transiting astrology and how we can use it to help better our lives and actually get our shit on track. This is an incredibly exciting week, in my opinion. I'm not taking this week lightly. I'm not taking this time period lightly at all. There's it's so easy to waste astrology energy, in my opinion, just to go, oh, well, this is happening, I'm not going to do anything with it. I'm not doing that this time around. I'm very invested into making a lot of changes during this time, and I hope you are too. We're going to talk about that as we get started. So let's just jump into it. So we're starting Monday off with the moon in Capricorn still. The big thing that I want to talk about, though, is Mars just stationed direct. Like, this is our first week with Mars now fully direct. And when Mars was retrograde and really slow, I was just talking to my sister about this the other day. It just feels like nothing is happening. It feels like nothing is moving forward. Everything is like just motionless. Venus is motionless in the sky. Mars is motionless in the sky. You have these two really important planets really not doing anything. And so it could feel like there's like some anxiety building up and just nothing is moving forward. However, now that Mars is actually technically moving forward, there's going to feel this little slight energy of things progressing 1% at a time. But it's Mars in Cancer. A lot of it is, hey, what are the things that we absolutely have to take care of? What are the necessities? What do we need to protect? A lot of Mars stationing direct in Cancer is just putting out fires, not necessarily like feeling super confident or ready to go on everything, but just putting out fires and taking care of the emergencies that are in front of you. That's what Mars stationing direct is. And I think that continues starting this week when we have the moon still in Capricorn, first making a sextile to Saturn, then it's going to trine Uranus, then it'll sextile Neptune, and then it ingresses into Aquarius. So you guys know what I kind of talk about when the moon is at the last degrees of these zodiac signs, hitting the outer planets. Not all that big of a deal. The only thing I really wrote down was, I just feel like a lot of the moon in Capricorn making the sextile to Saturn and trining Uranus is just like a little bit of cleanup after the Mars retrograde. Like, hey, Mars is now direct, moon's in Capricorn, it's a great time to work, it's a great time to detach from like your emotions and your situation, just kind of focus on what's in front of you. And it's just a little bit of like cleanup and getting things taken care of as we start Monday off. Now, as the moon leaves that trine to Uranus, again, there's some sort of inspirational breakthrough happening there, but then it makes it sextile to Neptune. All this really is, in my opinion, is just like kind of spaced out energy. Have you ever been like in a flow state doing something, which is really good, right? Really good for creative energy, but you're kind of spaced out. That's kind of the vibe until the moon goes into Aquarius. And when the moon goes into Aquarius, this is happening later in the evening. In my opinion, this is more of a detached feeling. And the other thing I wanted to talk about is once the moon goes into Aquarius, we start to begin this dark moon phase where the moon starts to disappear a little bit. And as the moon's in Aquarius, it is more connected to ideas and socializing and people and frameworks of ideas. The moon being in Aquarius just seems like a little bit more detached and cold and being a little bit more calculated about how we're going to go into this new moon in Pisces, which we'll talk about. So then we get to Tuesday. And Tuesday, we have the moon making a conjunction to Pluto really early in the morning. And then throughout the day, it will be making a sextile to Venus, and then it'll trine Jupiter. And we have our first highlight of the week, which is Mercury making a conjunction to Saturn. So on Tuesday, as the moon kind of conjoins Pluto, if you wake up early, you might feel like a little sense of like panic or anxiety or just kind of feeling a little overwhelmed. But throughout the day, things get a little bit more fun. Like the moon in Aquarius, sextiling Venus in Aries is a little bit more socializing. It's the moon, it's lunar. It's supposed to be a little bit more benefic, or at least the moon tries to be benefic, sextiling a benefic. And then once it sextiles Venus, it will then trine Jupiter. There's like this fun atmosphere energy, but the moon's in Aquarius. It's detached. You know, one of my favorite examples of Aquarius is actually my stepdad. He has Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, all in Aquarius. He was like born in February of 62. He is one of the most popular people in his community. everyone knows him, everyone loves him, and he always goes to parties and socializes, but he is the most fucking awkward person you will ever meet in your life. When he's at parties, everyone's talking to him and he just seems like awkwardly there, but he likes socializing. He likes being around people, even though it doesn't seem like it. It's really, really Aquarius. And that's how I kind of see Tuesday with the moon being there. It's like there's this fun atmosphere, but there's still this kind of detached, alienated feeling. Now, Mercury's going to be conjoining Saturn, though, and that's our first highlight of the week. The thing I wrote down was like message from an authority. Mercury is about communication. It's in detriment right now, and technically in its sign of fall of Pisces, where communication isn't exactly clear. One of my favorite ways to kind of talk about Mercury and Pisces is Mercury in Virgo is like writing on, in Times New Roman, on white paper, A4 paper, everything looks very clean and legible. Mercury in Pisces is like writing a quick note with highlighter on your hand. Like you're just not going to be able to read it. It's mostly just to kind of remember stuff. And so the communication is a little bit lacking here in terms of clarity, but it's conjoining Saturn, which is a planet about authority figures, limitations, and discipline. The thing that I would think about with Mercury conjoining Saturn is there's some sort of a message from an authority. Like if, for example, if you're like a Gemini rising and Mercury's conjoining Saturn in your 10th house, you're probably going to hear something from a boss. You might have to address something to a boss, to, some sort of a manager or something like that. But Mercury conjoining Saturn is also a message of like, no. Saturn is all about saying no. Saturn's all about less. Saturn's about restricting and constricting. And so Mercury conjoining Saturn just seems like, in terms of our ideas and the way that we communicate, there is some restriction there. In my opinion, there's also this level of like, hey, let's get clear about what's going on here. Mercury in Pisces, it's really easy to be a little bit aloof and a little bit all over the place. But conjoining Saturn is remembering like there's boundaries. It's kind of like bumper cars. If you've ever done the bumper cars at like a fair, sure, you can kind of go willy-nilly, but there's still a boundary that you can't exceed past. So on Tuesday, there is going to be this kind of message of, hey, what are your new restrictions? What are your new limitations? What sort of authority figures do you have in your life that are kind of saying, hey, this is what the issue is. This is what the problem is. And then on the other side of that, it's just kind of getting a little bit more serious with, the way that you're communicating, the way that you're thinking. And so then we get to Wednesday. And on Wednesday, we really only just have the moon making a square to Uranus. So the big thing here is the moon, when the moon's at a fixed sign, it's just trying to keep things consistent. It's not necessarily trying to change things. It's not trying to start things. It's just trying to keep things stable. But when it squares Uranus is all about like not having stability, instability, ups and downs, unpredictability. And the moon squaring Uranus is just another disruption. That's really all that's going on Wednesday. So while the moon's in Aquarius, we might be listening to other people, talking to other people, being more connected to our communities, to our tribes. There's going to be some disruption within that. And you just kind of have to anticipate that. So while you like, I used to be a big Ymir listener. There's 5 people that watch this that probably know who Ymir is, but they have a song title called "When Keeping It Real Goes Wrong." And for whatever reason, that song title came up for me for this transit, like just trying to keep it real, trying to go, everything trying to be easy, and it just doesn't happen that way. And so then we get to Thursday. Thursday is really where the vibe shift happens. Because number one, the moon is going to ingress into Pisces. We have the new moon in Pisces on the same day. The moon, I think, ingresses into Pisces super early in the morning, and then we have the new moon sometime later in the evening. And then after the moon will then make a square to Jupiter as it's like coming off of the new moon. But our other highlight that we have besides the new moon is Mercury making a sextile to Uranus. There is a lot to talk about here. Number one, as the moon goes into Pisces, I think about getting quiet. And the thing I wrote down is like, are you ready for what's next? If you're on the memberships, I have something called the Game Plan, which is like pretty much a monthly horoscope on steroids. It's pretty much meant for you to like watch and listen and plan your month out rather than just being like, oh, what's going on? I went super fucking hard in my Game Plan video because now I'm on a new website. I don't have to worry about copyright restrictions with YouTube. And so because of that, it gives me a little bit more creative freedom. I'm saying all this to say, I have really been looking at the meaning and significance of everything going from Pisces into Aries, the zodiac sign of endings, the zodiac sign of closure, the zodiac sign of like literally changing into the sign of birth, the sign of beginnings, the sign of spring. And there's so much symbolism there. And I really look at this new moon in Pisces as like, are you ready for what's next? Do you need to get quiet? And it's like the green room. In my Game Plan video, I kind of talked a little bit about the Super Bowl and what's his face? I can't remember his name now off the top of my head. The quarterback for the Eagles. Like he was so locked in, he was so in flow state. Like what was it like for him before that game started? Did he get quiet? Did he get clear about what his intention was? And the reason I brought up that game was that Venus in Aries is about like taking things, and like he took that Super Bowl. The Eagles didn't win. The Eagles stole that, and not steal as in like, oh, it was a dirty game. They like straight up took it from the Chiefs, and I found that very incredibly symbolic for what's going on right now. But as we have the moon going into Pisces and we get a little bit quiet, we get a little bit sensitive, and we have this new moon, this is the zodiac sign of like ending, like formally ending, formally getting out of stuff before we go into something new. What are you trying to change? What are you trying to get rid of? Where do you need to be quiet and actually examine what's going on internally? Because again, Pisces is all about spirituality and faith and hope, but on the internal spot. Sagittarius is more external, like, oh, let's go over here and this is going to be fun, blah, blah, blah. Pisces is like, we got to get the vibe right for that. So as we have this new moon in Pisces and we get a little bit quiet and we prepare for what's next, because immediately after this new moon, everything starts. Then the moon will make a square to Jupiter. And the thing that I kind of wrote was like, there might be this like struggling with that hope, with that faith within that. Because that's kind of the issue right now with a lot of the Pisces stuff is, sure, everything's in Pisces, but Jupiter's in detriment right now. Like, it's so easy to not have faith. It's so easy. It's so easy to do the things that we know aren't good for us, right? The things that are hard for us, that are good for us, are hard. The moon, like Jupiter just being in detriment, it's like, it's so easy to just say to have faith. It's so easy to just think, oh, just be faithful. But like when it actually comes to what that looks like, it's difficult. And I really feel like this new moon in Pisces is like, all right, I have to muster that strength. I have to get clear inside my own spirit, inside my own body on what I'm trusting and what I'm believing. But as the moon squares Jupiter, you're going to get hit almost immediately with a little sense of like, oh, do you actually believe? Or do you actually have faith? Are you actually ready to go? And that's temporary. Okay. But that feeling is still going to be there. Now, what is nice though, is that we do have our second highlight of the day on Thursday, which is Mercury making a sextile to Uranus. Something I like about Mercury, and Uranus, Mercury and Pisces is when I was in Colorado, I met this like group of people that I kind of partied with a few times, and there was just this guy who like he just became friends with everyone. Like I've met, like I'm really good at getting friends with everybody, but this guy, I mean, like it was like we had like a group of 5 people, there was like a group of like 30 people, and then like we were all like best friends, like hanging out, partying. And Mercury and Pisces just kind of reminds me of like being able to be at the right place at the right time, but not being able to explain it, not being able to rationalize it. It just intuitively happens, and the right words come out at the right time for the right things. And so Mercury making a sextile Uranus just reminds me of you like yes, fucking around and finding out, but not fucking around as in like, oh, I'm going to do something bad, I'm going to do something I'm not supposed to, but just genuinely being curious. What's fun about Mercury is Mercury's about rationality and logic, right? Logic's out the door with Mercury and Pisces. So like being curious, being inquisitive, doing things that necessarily don't have a rhyme or a reason to them, and just going from there might lead to some sort of a breakthrough. Now, this is a sextile. This isn't like, whoa, like you just, split the atom for the first time. It's more so of like, oh, hey, if I think about it this way, or if I do this, or if I change things in this manner, this happens. And this is like kind of a small little breakthrough. I needed to keep going. That's kind of the highlight that we have with Mercury sextiling Uranus. So Thursday's kind of all over the place, but it's really about getting quiet, getting clear. Think about the green room before you go on stage. Think about the locker room before you go out on the field. That's the vibe on Thursday. And you will kind of have that scary gut feeling, but that's like a good feeling that you're supposed to have. And you don't want to lean into it and say, oh my God, I have this gut feeling that things aren't going to go good. That means things aren't going to go good. It's like, no, you're just nervous, and you should keep trusting that. You should just keep moving forward through the nervousness anyway. And so then we get to Friday. And on Friday, the moon, while it's in Pisces, will first trine Mars, conjoin Saturn, then it's going to conjoin Mercury, and Mercury enters shadow as our highlight for Friday. So I think it's really funny how Mercury enters shadow immediately after this new moon and right before Venus goes retrograde, because just to me, it's another layer of complexity to the Venus retrograde. So the moon first conjoining, the moon in Pisces making a trine to Mars and conjoining Saturn and conjoining Mercury. The thing I wrote down was just like slowly and painfully, but surely, meaning, hey, like the moon's going to trine Mars. Moon's in Pisces. We have an emotional, we have an opportunity to adapt our emotions to help us take care of the things that we need to take care of, right? Like, have you ever had dishes piling up in the sink? You don't want to do them. And then all of a sudden, for whatever reason, you feel like doing them. Like it's just something to do. That's kind of the idea. Then the moon conjoins Saturn in Pisces, where it's like, okay, well, I'm already on this, train. I might as well keep going. And then the moon conjoins Mercury, where I think there's this like lightened mood about it. This is why I kind of wrote down like, yeah, things are going to be slowly. It's going to be painful because the moon's going to be going in between malefics. It's not going to be fun. But there is something about being in a flow state with it that I do think is nice. Now, as the moon conjoins Mercury, though, there is a level of clarity that we're getting. Again, this is why I'm such a big like proponent of like being busy with your hands, being in a flow state with something. Like I've talked a lot about how I've gotten into like shooting and guns and stuff like that. And the reason I like it so much is when you're on the range, when you're playing with guns, like you're not thinking of anything. Like you have a fucking weapon. You have something that can kill people. You have to be locked in. You have to be concentrated. And because it's such a surreal, it's so loud. And again, the recoil can be so extreme sometimes. It's so visceral that you get into this flow state and you're focusing on your target and you're thinking about your breath and you're thinking about every little tiny motion. You become in this flow state where it just allows you to detach from everything that you're thinking about. When you can find a hobby, when you can find an activity that forces you to take out what is going on in your brain and just focus in on your body, there's just so much relief that happens and you can think about so many more things. This is another reason why I liked riding motocross when I was young. Because when you're flying, going 40, 50 miles an hour on a dirt bike, going super high in the air and doing jumps, like you're not thinking of stuff, but you are, like you're processing things, even though it's, again, you probably know what I'm talking about via a different activity. But that's kind of the vibe when the moon conjoins Mercury. Now, Mercury enters shadow though. And I kind of talked about this on, I think, the game plan video of I'm a big fan of when the moon conjoins a planet right as a planet's doing something. Like, for example, when Venus goes retrograde, the moon conjoins Venus. But the moon conjoins Mercury and Mercury enters shadow. The thing I kind of wrote down was like having a little exclamation mark to this day. Something's kind of important about here. Mercury retrogrades involve delays. They involve miscommunications. They involve just things going a little bit slow. They're just being issues. There's something that is happening on this day that is going to be an issue. Remember what is being said to you. Remember what you were saying to other people, because you should probably take it with a grain of salt. It may or may not happen. Or if you want it to happen, it's going to involve delays. It's going to involve issues. And that's not a bad thing. That's just how it is. You know what I mean? So keep in mind as Mercury goes into shadow, what you're thinking about, what your plans are. They're going to be a little bit all over the place. And when we get to like next week and Mercury goes into Aries, we won't be as aloof. But right now things are a little bit aloof and you might think you have an idea. You might think you have a plan, but it's not as concrete as you might think it is. So then we get to the big day. That is Saturday. Moon goes into Aries. Mercury conjoins the North Node as our first highlight. We have Venus stationing retrograde as the next highlight. And then the moon conjoins Venus. Okay. I've been on such a different wavelength lately. Like it's sometimes hard to do these weeklies because these weeklies, I try to be like pragmatic, helpful, like on the game plan. I'm over here like on some spiritual shit. So I think I might just detour from the pragmatic and be a little bit more spiritual here. Moon's going into Aries. Number one, the moon is now like, it is the new moon. We are finally seeing the moon. It is visible. It's going into Aries. There's a supercharged energy to things. There's my emotions, my feelings are in the sign of action, in the sign of beginnings, in the sign of initiating things. So there's already that level, right? But Venus stations retrograde. When it comes to, and I wrote an email about this. I don't know if you guys are on my newsletter, but you should be on my newsletter. Which if you automatically sign up to my newsletter when you're like a member or you buy a calendar and stuff like that. But Evening Star Venus is about receiving things. You're receiving attention. You're receiving stuff, but it's in detriment. It's in Aries. There's stuff about it you don't like. I can't think of an example of a movie, but it kind of reminds me of like think of like a let's say you're a bartender, let's say like you're a cocktail waitress and dudes are getting a little bit grabby. And at a certain point, you stand up for yourself. Like, I don't know, you break a beer bottle and slit their throat. Is that a violent analogy? Yeah. But like, I don't know. I feel like the spiritual world is so turned off to any sort of violence, which is crazy because like this is, hey, on planet Earth, we go hard on Earth. But Venus stationing retrograde, Venus retrogrades in general or a reevaluation. You are receiving something right now that you don't like. You don't enjoy the context of it. Yeah, sure. There's something about it that might be fun, but it's time to change that. And this is it. The thing that I wrote down was kill it. Like, I've talked a little bit about these like 3-hour affirmation, personal development. Like it's just clips of like all the people's like, people that you like David Goggins, like clips of like what he's saying and other people are saying. It's like 3 hours long. And this one title of one is like just called Kill the Boy. And something I think about with this is killing a version of you or killing a version of something that's going on in your life. And I mean that word, by the way. Like, I don't mean go literally kill someone, by the way. Come on. But I know I got some fucking schizos watching this, so maybe I do need to say that. But what does metaphysically killing something look like? What needs to die? What needs to, it almost reminds me of amputation. Maybe you need to cut off something in order to live. And for some people, that might be a health thing. That might be a job. That might be a friend. That might be you. And I don't mean killing yourself. Please don't do that. I fucking hate suicide. It's so dumb. It's though killing a part of yourself that you can't stand anymore. Because like when I talk about, like the thing I fucking hate about people into astrology is they just let time go by. They just let time go by rather than honoring the time. So much is changing whether you like it or not. And there's parts of you that you want to change. There's part of you that you don't like, that you want to change. But do you want it bad enough to do something about it? Like, this is why I like the term killing it. Like, it's kind of like, I remember when I was a kid, my first experience of death was my dad was a big bird person. We lived up in the mountains of Cherry Valley, and it was just, we had a beautiful house, just a beautiful view. And he was a big bird person. So we always had these like bird feeders, right? We had hummingbirds, we had all types of birds, but then we'd attract pigeons. And for the people are going to get all butthurt about this, but like, just, you know, people on a farm or a ranch would understand this. So we had a bunch of pigeons, and my dad would pay me to kill the pigeons. And I had just like a little BB gun. And me and this neighbor kid, one time we both had BB guns. We were just having a blast shooting pigeons. And this one time we shot a pigeon pretty fucking close, and it just didn't die. And we shot it like, I don't know, 5 or 6 times, and it would not die. And it was one of those moments where I was like, oh wow, death is a surreal thing. What am I doing? I guess like, you know, it's one, like I guess when you're a little boy, like you just don't understand stuff, but like when something's not dying, you're like, ugh, like, ooh, that's not a good thing. And I say that because like that really kind of just shifted my perspective on a lot of on things like death and like honoring that. You know what I mean? Like I had to go and, you know, kill that bird in a way that was like a little bit hardcore for me. I was really young. I was like maybe like 8 or 9. And so I say that because there's something like death is very taboo in this society, and it's very shameful because it is such a rite of passage. People don't want to talk about death. And I forgot why I was going to say this. I was thinking about making a video about this earlier, but like one of the biggest things I ever went through in my life was pretty much burying my father and going through that. And it was something spiritual where like, because of where my family is at, like I kind of became the patriarch. I became the man in my family. And there was just something that like I couldn't explain that to someone, you know what I mean? And why I'm kind of hounding on this with Venus retrograding in Aries is, what do you have to like kill? What part of you do you have to kill? And I mean that, like, is there a part of you that is weak? And it's like, would you rather kill the part of you that's weak, or would you rather keep suffering? Would you rather keep doing what you're doing, knowing you're not liking it? Or would you rather face the music and fight? I mean, again, there's times when I was a young kid, I had to get in fights in school. And it wasn't because, you know, like I was looking for them, but just at a certain point, you got to stand up for yourself. And it's like, you know what? I don't want to get in a fight. It's terrifying. I don't want to get beat up. And with my family, I always got in trouble for fights. Even if it wasn't my fault, I'd still get in trouble. So it's just like a lose-lose. But like at a certain point, I had to fucking defend myself. I had to stand up for myself. And I just look at this Venus retrograde as like, there's something to kill and there's something to take. And it's one of those things of, if not now, when? So much is about to change. And you need to have a reevaluation of what it is that you're attracting, what it is that you're getting, and what are you willing to do to change that? Because this is the time. Again, I really like when the moon conjoins planets when the planets are doing something. Like the moon conjoins Venus too, which the moon is just kind of like saying, hey, yeah, this is a big deal. The other highlight that we have is Mercury conjoins the North Node. And the thing with the Mercury North Node thing is, the thing I wrote down was the need for more and confusion and intuition. And this is something I call out my clients because I got it called out in me. And it was one of the biggest things that's changed my life is confusion is a defense mechanism. You're not confused. Oh, I don't know what to do. Oh, I'm not really sure. Shut the fuck up. Yeah, you do. Confusion is a defense mechanism. You can look back at childhood and be like, oh, where was confusion getting you out of trouble? Where was confusion a safety mechanism to protect you from understanding what was going on? Confusion's a defense mechanism. You're not confused. Mercury conjoining the North Node is a really hard balance between confusion and intuition. And you're going to have to battle this confusion, and you're going to really have to trust your intuition. Now, what is intuition? Intuition is not fear. Intuition is your ability to decipher what is right and what's wrong. There are things in this world that we can all agree with that are right or wrong, that we don't necessarily have to state exactly what it is. You just know. And Mercury conjoining the North Node is cranking up the knob to 11 of, oh my God, what's happening? Oh my God, am I confused? Or oh my God, am I actually understanding this? Am I actually getting in the flow state? Am I actually allowing my mind to dissolve its boundaries in order to open up? It's like neuroplasticity is what I kind of think of with Mercury and Pisces. And it's really funny. The I'm gonna botch this, but for the people that know what I'm talking about, they'll know what I'm talking about. Your brain has like myelin or something like that like strengthens neural connections essentially. And there's like two ways to like really change it. It's like either repetitive through long changes or whatever, but also through trauma. Like trauma instantly changes your beliefs about something. And it's like one of those things that you can rewrite after a long time, but it's like you need a traumatic shake-up situation. This is what's fun about things like magic or things like, again, ceremoniously setting a context up for your life. Like, okay, when I walk through that door, or like, for example, like when I'm going to put all my childhood trauma on this board and I'm going to punch this board. And when I punch this board, I'm going to break through my trauma. That's, and again, you could set it up and play music and get it dark and light candles and make it this whole thing. But Mercury conjoining the North Node, in my opinion, is going to ramp up the confusion. It's going to ramp up the misunderstanding, or you're going to be able to like really lean into that intuition. But this is not an easy day. This is not like Venus is retrograde, everything's fun now. None of this is easy. Like starting is the hardest part. This is what I think is really funny about Aries, is that it's about beginning, it's about initiating. And it's usually the first step in anything is the hardest part, because an object in motion tends to stay in motion and an object at rest tends to stay at rest. And you're changing that. So like what needs to change? And by the way, we have months of this. This is not Saturday. We have the Venus retrograde in Aries, Mercury retrograde in Aries. Then we have eclipses. Then Neptune goes into Aries. Whoa, that's a crazy one. And then Saturn goes into Aries. And again, for the uninitiated, Neptune going into Aries is not just like, oh, whatever, the moon's going through Aries. This is a 15-year long shift. Saturn going to Aries is also a bigger shift. Saturn conjoining Neptune is a bigger thing. These are not small deals. So I would really have you, look, you're going to be living your life on Saturday. A lot of us will be doing our own thing. We're not going to get a moment to tap in, but I would really allow yourself over the course of this week, let your subconscious gargle and chew on what is absolutely needing to change. And that brings us to Sunday, which is how we pretty much close this weekly, which is, look, the moon, while it's in Aries, is going to first sextile Jupiter really early in the morning, pretty much really late Saturday night. And then it makes a square to Mars. Then we'll have our first highlight, which is Mercury conjoining Neptune. And then our second highlight, which is the sun squaring Jupiter. So I find this funny because the moon making a sextile to Jupiter is like, all right, cool, here's all these ideas. But then the moon squaring Mars is, the thing I wrote down was hope to frustration. And there's too many ideas and not enough juice, right? We live in this world of endless information. And it's all useless at the end of the day, to be honest. Like, you can keep looking up what to do. You can keep looking up how to change your life. You can keep looking up and learning and doing this. But until you actually do the fucking thing, you're not doing anything. Like, and this is something I talked about in my How to Unlock Your Goals webinar. It's just like so much of information is a circle jerk to feed your ego. And you actually have to do the work. And I think as the moon's in Aries making that square to Mars, it's not easy. You might think it is. You might be excited about it. You might be ambitious, but then you do that work and there's something blocking you. Like, you're not just going to magically change everything in your life and it's just super easy peasy. Like, you are going to have to get rid of the old self. You are going to be facing that every day. Talk to people who've gotten sober from alcohol, who actually had an issue with it. Like, they weren't just like, oh yeah, I got sober, it was easy. It was like, they're constantly having to address that part of them. And now they're this new person, but they're always constantly addressing that. And so then we have Mercury conjoining Neptune. And look, the thing I wrote down was this is absolute delusion for better or for worse. You know, something that was kind of trendy on social media a couple months ago was like, oh, are you the main character? And so many people were like, oh, you're not the main character. It's like, why? What? You guys don't act as like the main character in your life? Why? Why wouldn't you do that? And I say that because Mercury conjoining Neptune is like, number one, any sort of communication is just like, it's just let it be. People are going to say things that they're going to say. Like, have you ever like been like to a bar at like 1 a.m. and you're not that drunk, but everyone's fucking turned and they're just, people just saying things. You're just like, whatever, that doesn't mean anything. Like, they're just too turned. That's like Mercury conjoining Neptune. But the reason I put absolute delusion for better or for worse is some of you are going to be making up stories as to why this is bad. Some of you are going to be making up stories as to why this isn't good for you. Some of you are going to be making up stories about why you're a victim. You are. And it's not going to get you anywhere. It's going to make you right, but you're still going to be miserable. And then there's other people that are going to have Mercury conjoining Neptune, and they're going to allow themselves to have that creativity. And I know that sounds like a weak word, but again, here come the drug analogies. If you've ever done any sort of like psychedelic before, there's just shit that like you can't really explain, that you see that you're like, that's actually kind of fucking insane that I'm seeing this. I'm feeling this. And I would apply that to your life of allowing yourself to see things in a way that you haven't seen, because Neptune distorts, right? What do you need to distort in your world, the way that you see or the way that you communicate, in order to get where you need to go? Because if you keep doing the same thing, you're going to get the same results. So something has to change at some point. And then the sun makes a square to Jupiter as our last highlight of the week. And this one's funny to me because and I talked about this in the game plan video, but like willpower doesn't work with shitty beliefs. Does that make sense? The sun is in the superior position to Jupiter here. Sun is ruled by Jupiter at this point. Not too much dignity going on here, but it's squaring Jupiter and Gemini, where it's like you're mustering up this willpower, but you're realizing, oh, if you don't have willpower, if your belief is like, you know, if you have shitty beliefs of like, oh, I can't do things. Like if you have a belief that you can't do things and then you're trying to do something, well, you're going to realize something's not going to work there. And so sun squaring Jupiter, I really find funny. Because I think this is really the testament to like of whether or not you believe what you believe, because you'll do what you do. When we get to next week, we have Mercury going into Aries. We have Mercury sextiling Pluto, and we have the sun trining Mars. The fun part about next week is it's just all about saying it with your chest. And we're going to get more and more into that. But I really want you, because this is not just this week. Next week is actually a little bit more chill, but then the week after that is crazy. And then it just gets crazier and crazier and crazier. What are we doing? Do we need anything else? Are you ready? How much worse does it need to get in order to make a change? Because this is the time, and it's going to come and go whether you join us or not. I'm going. I want you to join me. A lot of other people are going to go, and rather than being scared, or I shouldn't say scared, be scared. It doesn't really matter, but go anyway. If you don't know what you have to do, that's okay. Go anyway. You'll figure it out. Like I don't care what your excuses are. Have your excuses, but do it anyway. And that's not easy. I mean, for some people, it could be easy. For me, it's not easy. I love buying my bullshit. I've told you guys that story before. I love buying my bullshit. I buy it all the time. I spend so much money buying my own bullshit, and I'm over it. so I'm gonna like buy my bullshit and then not buy it too. I don't even know how to explain what I'm going through right now. So I'm gonna leave you guys off with that. Let me know in the comments. Like, actually let me know, because I read the comments. I may not interact with them because that's for my own mental health reasons, but I want you to write in the comments what you actually want to change. And also say your rising sign, because if you're like, hey, I'm a Taurus rising, this is what's going on, other Taurus risings can see if they can relate. I'm going to leave you guys off with that. I love and appreciate every single one of you, and I'll be seeing you next week.